Innovation, imagination, wonder. These are just some of the words used to describe Dr. Harvey Passes. Dr. Passes explores interesting people and ideas that will stimulate you. He questions the people who develop, create, and employ novel concepts in business and everyday lives. He especially loves to speak with successful people. How did they do it? How can you do it too? So let's join Dr. Harvey Passes in his quest of wonder and curiosity as we watch Dr. Harvey Passes Presents.
If something happened 60 years ago, do you think it would have relevance today? You're thinking, what is he talking about now? No, we're not going to take you to Long Island wine country. No, we're not going to be talking about the bounty of the waters around the coast of Long Island. No, we're not going to be going to a restaurant. No, we're not even going to be meeting anyone from any one of our wonderful hospitals here on Long Island. But we are going to be staying on Long Island. And we are going to be taking a little trip, something that happened 60 years ago, and see how today we have some people who are keeping something alive and showing how there is an absolute relevance in today's world. And I'm talking about the Holocaust. No, don't turn this set off. This isn't going to be something where you're going to get all sorts of forlorn and sad. Actually, today is going to be a message of hope, because I have two very interesting people today who are bringing this message of hope about something that's going on in Glen Cove. That's right, Glen Cove. Come, let's meet some interesting people. My first guest, you like the way I opened that up?
Thank you, Harvey.
Was that good? Howard Maier.
Pleasure.
Pleasure's mine, Howard.
Thank you for having us here today.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Let me introduce you, and then we'll come over to Silvana. Not Silvana, to Silvana. Okay, see how I get that in there, too?
That was very good.
You like that, huh?
Yes, I
okay,
do.
These interesting people here are from the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center right here in Glen Cove, right in good old Nassau County. And very, very, very interesting. Howard Maier is the chairman of the board of directors of the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center. And Silvana Gullo is also the director of development of the center.
Correct.
Okay? And thank you very much. Goodbye. No, let's go on with the show now. Okay, so these interesting people are involved in something which is very fascinating. Howard, explain what happened 60 years ago and why is 60 years ago relevant today?
Well, thank you. The Holocaust, as most people know, was absolutely horrific. Millions and millions and millions of people died in Europe. And it's the horrific aspect of the Holocaust that allows us to teach moral messages, important moral messages. In the Holocaust, simplistically, there were victims and there were perpetrators. But the majority of people in Europe were bystanders. Some were scared, and others were anti-Semitic or believed in the Nazi ideology. And it was the bystanders who became heroes, individuals who decided to hide a Jew or to save somebody with a morsel of food. Those became the rescuers in the Holocaust. And we use the people aspect of the Holocaust that I'm describing now to help people today understand that when you see an act of intolerance, whether that act of intolerance is anti-Semitic, racial, or bullying at school,
Simplest.
or isolating a person because of an accent or they don't have the right clothes, not to accept that, but to actually do something about it. And so we call all this teaching the lessons of the Holocaust. And that is the mission of our Holocaust Center, to actually make people aware of what can happen in a society when you allow these things to happen in comparison to seeing these kinds of acts happening and not taking action. So we run Holocaust classes, and we also run many tolerance programs. Every year we teach thousands of students. Last year we taught about 35,000 students from Nassau County, Suffolk County, and even about 10% of our audience comes from Queens.
That's fascinating. Let's move this on. Before we move on, actually, I had a thought as you were speaking, Howard, and that people again should not think when they see and hear the word Holocaust that this is just a memory lane trip.
Right.
This is something that's relevant and that's new for today, something that occurred years ago. Silvana, we're going to be seeing a video clip that you have presented, and that will explain a lot. Would you explain to the audience what exactly we're going to be seeing?
It's breathtaking almost when you see it, because what it is a story about one of the survivors, Holocaust survivors, that was in a school, and a response he received from a child in that school who connected to him because turns out that she was a survivor as well from Rwanda.
From Rwanda, no less.
Exactly.
How
when
old,
you
how
see
old was she
at the time?
She was 15 at the time
Okay.
when David spoke to
And David
Jacqueline's
is how
class.
old? Was how old at that time?
Well, he was in
About
his-
70.
Okay, so you're looking at a
Complete
tremendous
opposites.
dichotomy.
Complete. I mean, they couldn't be more opposite yet more
But
the
there was a
same.
heavy thread.
Unbelievable connection occurred. So much so that the center said, well, this is the message, and let's put it together.
So let's
And
run
this
it.
is
Let's
what
see
the
this
video
right now.
is.
Okay, can we run the DVD, and we'll cut our sound in here so that we could hear the sound of the DVD.
Jews and approximately 5 million others throughout Europe were exterminated by the Nazi regime during the Holocaust, considered the worst atrocity against mankind. 50 years later, during a civil war in Rwanda, more than 800,000 people were slaughtered by Hutu extremists. This is a story of how two genocide survivors crossed over continents, cultures, and generations to discover each other. Theirs is a story of hope and of the strength of the human spirit. The Holocaust is remembered as the most heinous crime against civilization. David Gewurtzman was just an 11-year-old boy growing up in the small town of Luszice, Poland, when the Nazi occupation began. He and his family escaped death, hidden by a Polish farmer for 2 years beneath a pigsty in a rat-infested pit. David and his family were the lucky ones.
8,000 Jewish people lived in the ghetto. By the end of the war, out of the 8,000, 16 came out alive. Everybody else was killed. I was one of the lucky, very few lucky people in that my whole family survived.
David escaped to the U.S. and began his new life. As the world vowed, we would never witness such an atrocity again. 50 years later, a different continent, a different country, and a 9-year-old Rwandan girl named Jacqueline Murekatete had no idea what her future would hold.
We started hearing Hutu extremists, Hutus being the majority ethnic group in Rwanda. We started hearing them saying that Tutsis, my ethnic group, and the minority ethnic group in Rwanda, the Tutsis were, among other things, cockroaches, there were snakes, the Tutsis deserved to die, and they started encouraging Hutus everywhere in Rwanda to start killing their Tutsi neighbors.
Jacqueline found refuge in an orphanage, and when 100 days of carnage ended, she looked forward to being reunited with her family. An uncle broke the news.
I was told that one day during the genocide, my neighbors had come and they had taken my parents and my 6 siblings and most of my aunts and uncles and most of the Tutsis in the village, and they had taken them to a nearby river where they proceeded to butcher them with machetes.
Eventually granted asylum in the U.S., Jacqueline was adopted by her uncle and began her education. Meanwhile, David, retired and in his 70s, began to speak before young people to educate them on the horrors of the Holocaust.
Usually in every city, they make all the Jews come down into the square, like I mentioned before in our town. They load them up into cattle cars. They're all killed. Then the bodies are put into these ovens and they are burned.
One day, in a classroom where David was speaking, Jacqueline discovered a survivor soulmate.
Both of us were children, surrounded by siblings, by friends, with goals and dreams, and how all that was taken away.
So moved by David's story, Jacqueline wrote him a letter and shared her story.
The pictures in the New York Times, the pictures on television, seeing bodies floating down the river. These people were the same people that I've seen being killed in Poland. The Holocaust was repeating itself. The world has not learned. And all of a sudden, we came across Jacqueline's letter, and my hair stood up. It was so powerful, so emotional, and it had such a message to me.
So I didn't really understand what had happened in Rwanda. I couldn't understand how my neighbors had killed my family, and then coming to this country and, of course, learning later on that so many countries knew that this was happening, that this is something that was on CNN, on BBC.
Jacqueline and David are on a mission together to educate the world, and especially young people, to embrace individual differences and promote compassion and understanding of what makes each life unique.
She being young and I not so young, she being black, I being white, from Africa, from Europe, Jewish, Christian, in every possible way we were so different. Yet because of our experiences, we felt so close together that we were like brother and sister.
As a survivor, I do have a responsibility to my parents, to my siblings, to all my relatives who died, to tell the story of their death in hopes, of course, of preventing future genocides such as that which occurred.
If we're going to keep hatred in our own hearts for the rest of our lives and also have our children infected with that feeling, the world is going to continue in that manner. Let's not forget what happened, but let's learn from it so that we will not repeat the things that what our parents or grandparents have done.
I'm teasing you.
Wow. I don't know about you, but I thought that was an incredibly moving piece. Very, very interesting. Amazing. Two people who couldn't be more diametrically opposite and yet had a thread that was so thick and so short. To bring those two people together with a message, and frankly, I look at that message as a message of hope. And let's continue. Let's move on. Let's move on with this. First, before we get into discussions about some of the programs and activities that go on at the Holocaust Center, let's just, if we will, let the folks at home, I'd like you to know, if you're interested and you want to come down and see this not-for-profit incredible organization, which is located, as I said, in Glen Cove, I'll ask my crew, throw on just a slate. I can talk over it with the phone number, the address, so people will know if they want to get in touch with this organization, either to look and see what's going on yourself. Also, if you would like to, even if you have any artifacts, maybe you have a family member or a friend or yourself that was involved in this horrific time, and you have some artifact that you would like to preserve and present to this center, it would probably be hung up somewhere with some information about, well, your friend or family or yourself and what you went through, to preserve and to teach and to remember. So you have the phone number there if you want to donate some of your time, you want to be a volunteer and help continue the good work, which we're going to learn more about the programs in a moment. So we'll periodically throughout the show, we'll present that slate again. Thanks very much for putting up the slate. Let's take it down now. That's great. Okay, Silvana, tell me a little bit now about some of the programs. We saw on the monitor student programs. What goes on, what happens, and what were some of your observations?
Well, you know, I was new. So I came in and I said, okay, I'm going to sit in the back of the room and watch one of these tolerance workshops, as they call it. And they come in, they give the students an overview of the Holocaust, really short, in a very short, concise way. And they're directing it mostly at middle and high school students. So you know how middle and high school students, if you have any teenagers in your household, are not the easiest to get through to. So you see slouching, you see, you know, this and that.
Boredom.
Right.
I don't want to be here.
And so they tell a little bit, and you know what? The Holocaust seems to really perk their interest, because they're like, is this real? Did this really happen? Because it's so horrendous. And then a survivor gets up there. Now, this person is talking, I've seen 2 or 3 different survivors, and they're all impacting. Why? Because they were teenagers or children during the time where they had a perfectly normal life, and they're happy, and they're at home, and they have families and, you know, beautiful things. And all of a sudden, little by little, it was taken away. And before they knew it, they were seeing their families carted off, or they themselves. And one survivor told the teenagers a story about how her father threw her out of a train to save her. And her mother and sister weren't brave enough to jump out of that train. So they, of course, ended up in a concentration camp and burned. But her father and she did survive. But I sat in the back of the room as an observer and watched what happened to the backs, because I was watching from the back.
To the back of the kids.
The back of the kids.
From slouching.
When the lady went like this and showed her numbers. You saw this perched in their chair and just listening like so intently. And I have to tell you, I left the room a changed person. And I'm very empathetic. I'm Italian. And Italians are very empathetic, lovely people, if I say so myself. I mean, the truth is...
Empathetic. I want to make sure it didn't come across as apathetic, so someone didn't hear you wrong. Go ahead.
Empathetic.
Nice.
In fact, Italians ended up being a lot of the rescuers, the righteous. They helped the Jews quite a bit. But so anyway, I was already like that. But I left the room a different person, unable to stand by and watch something happening in front of me and not take a stand. I know every one of those kids changed. I know they did, because after they saw the survivor, they broke down into groups, and they have facilitators who are professionals. Most of them are teachers. Speak to the kids, and they create this role play based on what they face every day in their schools. What happens on the school bus or in the cafeteria, or they're watching somebody get beat up in the hallway. And they do the role play, and they each have to decide what their role is going to be. Am I going to be the perpetrator? Am I the victim? Or, as you would imagine, 90% of them will start out being bystanders. But by the time they walk out of that center, I am telling you, they know this for a fact, right? Because they get these surveys back from the teachers, and they get these forms filled out. The kids are different. And the way I look at it, if you can change slightly how they react to each other, how they treat somebody on the street, then you've done something amazing. And this program does that.
I love your passion for this, and because my foundation is passion, and there's no question. I see this with both of you about this. Howard, I would like you to amplify. I think there's a point here that I really want to bold, I want to underline, and I want to jam it down everyone's throat. And that are the 4 words that was mentioned earlier, and you mentioned 3 of them right now. And let's talk about this for a moment. And that's perpetrator, hero, bystander, and victim. You're one of those four. Talk about that. This is a key issue.
Well, the most amazing thing is people in general, each person is all four of those at different times.
That's true.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes what one really has to think about is, and most people take most notice when they're the victim. But in many cases, identifying the victim and identifying the perpetrator, that's the easy part. The challenge is that when you are the bystander, and we're a bystander in any given day many times, if you see a person harassed, if you see a person, you can't sit here, that seat is reserved. People often are being kept away, they're being isolated, and our role is to really stand up for that person, make a difference, become the rescuer, become the individual who is the upstander rather than a bystander. And
I like
that's
that,
really
upstander
what we
bystander.
try to convey to groups, whether it's the student groups that Silvana is discussing in a tolerance workshop. And in fact, this terminology of bystander, victim, perpetrator, and hero, rescuer, we incorporate in our regular Holocaust classes. What Jacqueline sat through initially was a Holocaust class. So we teach both Holocaust classes and tolerance workshops, but we do it always from a human perspective. During the Holocaust, this happened to people. There were people who were bystanders. There were people who were rescuers, the upstanders. And that happens today, too. And we try to really provide the stimulus to show people, whether it's students or our adult groups, that when society doesn't stand up, what ultimately could happen is something like the Holocaust. And that's why you use the word passion. Yes, Silvana has the passion. I have the passion. Our staff and our hundreds of volunteers have the passion. You know, we have many Holocaust survivors, about 50 of them, who share their experiences as Silvana described. And they do this not to have people feel bad for them in terms of what happened to them 60 or 70 years ago, but rather to help people understand that when they see an act of injustice, they can do the right thing. They should do the right thing. And that's really what our organization is all about. We allow ourselves to use the Holocaust as a major teaching tool. We sometimes think of ourselves as being in the character building business. And that's really why we're as strong as we are.
I think it's a key point also for my viewer to really understand that this isn't a Jewish thing, is it?
Oh, thank you for saying that.
This isn't a Jewish thing.
No. You know, it's
Clearly.
interesting that you asked that question. Most Holocaust centers, and there are about 200 Holocaust museums in the United States,
Right.
were founded many, many years ago with a never again mentality.
Correct.
This happened to the Jews, and it should never, ever happen to the Jews again. Holocaust organizations, and very much including ours, fully recognize what happened during the Holocaust, how this happened to Jews, and also happened to millions of non-Jews. But that today, the learning from this is absolutely universal. So our board is comprised of Jews and non-Jews alike. There are members of different clergy involved on our board, and our staff is comprised of Jewish staff members and non-Jewish staff members like Silvana. So no, we are definitely not a Jewish organization, and yet often identified as such because the Holocaust, the Nazis really did go after the Jews as well as others.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Well, you see, that was the beauty of those people. They weren't prejudiced. They would go after everybody.
If you weren't quote unquote
Aryan.
There you go.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you look at around a room and there's always something. I mean, you say to yourself, could I be a victim? Guess what?
Absolutely.
Every one of us could be a
Absolutely.
victim. So we shouldn't
Absolutely.
allow that to
An
be.
interesting fact about the Nazis in that period, the first 200,000 people who were killed, who were singled out, were physically and mentally retarded in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
That was really one of the major aspects of the beginning of the Holocaust.
And most
That
people
was their
don't
ethnic
know
cleansing.
that, by the way,
Exactly.
right? Most people don't know that. I mean, the kids
It's
are
documented.
are
We
very
only got
surprised.
about 3 to 4 minutes left. So a couple of fast things here. First, what do you say? Quick answers. What do you say as it relates to individuals saying the Holocaust never occurred? Look at the president of Iran. Hello, it didn't occur. This is just a whole big PR thing. What do you do?
Well, what we do is we make a center that has
Proof.
that has videotaped recordings of the survivors, so when they're no longer with us, their stories will be told for generations to come. And there is a lot to say, right, Howard?
Well, absolutely. One of the reasons that former President Eisenhower, when he was the general of the United States forces, who walked into a concentration camp, he stopped everything. He brought all of his soldiers around, the ones who were not in the camp. He wanted them all inside the camp. Why? So they could take personal witness. And we actually have some members of the United States Army who give testimony on behalf of our Holocaust Center. And so Silvana is absolutely correct. It's documented. It's also been seen by members of our own military, and there is just no question. There might be a question of exactly how many people were butchered, but there's not a question of why it happened and to what magnitude it happened.
You know, I'll leave it with this, and that if you just don't believe that the Holocaust occurred 60 some odd years ago, then don't. But then look what happened in Rwanda, what happened in Darfur, what happened in Kosovo, what happened with all of this, with all this ethnic cleansing. It was alive then, it was alive in our recent memory, and now as well. So yes, it's there. We're just about out of time. Do you have any parting comments? And also, I would like my crew to put that slate back on also for a little bit, and maybe when we show the ending credits, so if people want to get a chance to see the phone number and the address, they could, of the Holocaust Center. Any parting comments, Howard?
Sure. If you represent a school, a company, an organization that's interested in one of our classes, whether it's a student class on Holocaust or a tolerance workshop, please feel free to contact us, call up, ask for our education department, and we would be delighted to schedule such a program either at our facility or at yours.
Terrific.
Also, if you're
Silvana?
looking to volunteer some time, there's lots that can be done. We're growing. We want to reach as many kids as we can, and we can do that with the help. And we thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
For having us here
Well,
and for sharing
Absolutely,
our story.
my pleasure. I thought it was it had value, it was worthwhile, and it's educational. You look like you wanted to say something. Right?
I had one other thing to add, and that's for those of you who are Holocaust survivors. We are going through a major renovation of our permanent exhibit, and we could very much use your artifacts, whether it's a star or anything else that you have,
anything.
Family photos, passports from during that Holocaust era. Please call that phone number, let us know. We'll schedule an appointment for you to come visit us in Glen Cove, and would very much appreciate it, and it's really for the public to be able to observe.
Mm-hmm. I think this is fantastic. We're out of time.
Thank you.
Thank you
Howard
for having us.
Maier.
A pleasure. Thank you
Pleasure
very
is
much.
mine. Silvana Gullo.
Thank you.
My pleasure. I really appreciate you taking the time to come down to help me inform everyone about this really inspirational and hopeful organization that you have. That's the best words that I can use.
Thank you.
And I hope that you gain something, because these shows are designed to teach you and show you things that you say, gee, I didn't know that. I didn't either. So if I didn't know it, I figured maybe other people might not also. And I figured this would be really a terrific thing. So I hope you had a good time, and it was fun as well as informational. So Dr. Pass is saying, as I always do, like these people, whatever you do, do it with passion. Until then, see you.